Some people walk into your life loudly, like a storm, like they already know they belong there. Quinlan Vale wasn't like that. The first time I met him, he barely raised his voice above normal conversation. But somehow, within 10 minutes, every person around him moved like gravity had shifted direction. And me? I was standing on a ladder with dust on my hands and a screwdriver in my back pocket, trying not to drop an air filter on the floor of his office. My name's Percy Hale. I'm 37 years old, owner of a small HVAC maintenance company called Northline Air. It sounds bigger than it is. Most days it's just me, my friend Luis, and a van that rattles every time it goes over 50 miles an hour. I've spent the last 8 years fixing ventilation systems in office buildings while raising my son Noah alone. That's my life. Work, bills, soccer practice, grocery lists, repeat. That Tuesday started like every other Tuesday. I dropped Noah off at school at 7:30. He forgot his lunch on the kitchen counter, so I had to drive back, grab it, and race through traffic before the first bell. By the time I got to Oraline Group downtown, I was already running on cold coffee and 4 hours of sleep. Oraline was one of those buildings where everything looked expensive enough to make you nervous touching it. Glass walls, marble floors, receptionists with perfect posture. I signed in, grabbed my visitor badge, and headed to the executive floor with my equipment cart. The assistant leading me looked stressed out before we even got on the elevator. She kept checking her phone every 5 seconds. "Mr. Vale's office is last door on the left," she said quickly. "Please just finish the ceiling unit today. The others can wait." "You got it. And please don't touch anything on his desk." That should have been my warning. The office itself surprised me. Not because it was huge. Honestly, I expected bigger. But everything inside looked controlled. Intentional. Dark shelves. Clean desk. One framed photograph near the window of an older man teaching a little boy how to fish. No awards. No giant ego wall. Just quiet. I set my tools down and got to work on the ventilation unit above the seating area. About 20 minutes in, my phone buzzed in my pocket. "Dad," Noah whispered dramatically the second I answered. "I forgot my permission slip." "You forgot it yesterday, too." "Yeah, but this time it matters emotionally." I laughed before I could stop myself. "That's not how permission slips work. It is if you care about my future." I shook my head while tightening the panel above me. "I'll bring it after work. You're the best." "No, I'm the idiot enabling this behavior." "Love you too." I hung up smiling, and that was exactly when my elbow clipped a silver pen sitting near the edge of the desk. The pen rolled fast across the surface, straight toward an open glass of water. I moved too late, but another hand caught the glass before it tipped. I looked down from the ladder and nearly missed the next step completely. Quinlan Vale stood beside the desk, holding the glass in one hand like none of it had surprised him. He was tall, lean, dark-haired, wearing a charcoal suit with the tie already loosened slightly like he'd been dealing with problems since sunrise. He wasn't movie star handsome in an obvious way. It was worse than that. Controlled. Sharp. The kind of face that looked calm even when the person behind it wasn't. "You almost drowned my calendar," he said. His voice wasn't angry, just observant. "Sorry," I said immediately, climbing down. "I didn't hear you come in." "That's probably because you were arguing with a child about emotional permission slips." I stared at him for half a second before realizing he'd overheard the call. "That's my son. One day, he's going to become a lawyer. God help me if that happens." Something at the corner of Quinlan's mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. More like the memory of one. I expected him to leave after that, but he didn't. He sat behind the desk, opened a file on his tablet, and kept working while I finished the unit. Most executives either ignored people like me completely or hovered around acting nervous about their expensive furniture. Quinlan did neither. He just watched quietly, sometimes when he thought I wouldn't notice. About 10 minutes later, the receptionist from downstairs rushed into the office looking close to tears. "Mr. Vale, I'm so sorry. I mixed up the investor schedules and now Mr. Penfield's lunch reservation." She stopped suddenly when she saw me there. Quinlan looked up calmly. "Breathe first. I ruined the booking. Did you call the restaurant?" "They said they're full." "Then call the assistant manager directly." His name is Daniel. Tell him I helped his daughter get into Westview Academy last year." The woman blinked. "You remember that? You're shaking hard enough to forget your own name right now," Quinlan said. "Go fix it." She nodded quickly and hurried back out. I went back to packing my tools slowly. "You didn't have to do that," I said. "Do what?" "Make her feel less terrified." Quinlan looked at me for a moment like the question surprised him. People work better when they're not afraid all the time. That answer stayed with me longer than it should have. I zipped my equipment bag and headed toward the door. The unit should be good now. I'll send a maintenance report this afternoon. "Percy." I turned back. Quinlan stood from his chair and walked around the desk slowly. "Are you doing anything Sunday evening?" The question caught me so off guard I honestly thought I heard him wrong. "Sunday. I need someone to attend an event with me." I stared at him. "You mean professionally?" "Yes." That explanation somehow made it more confusing. For the first time, Quinlan actually smiled a little. "Small. Tired. Real. There's a charity gala this weekend," he said. "Important investors will be there. I need a partner present." I folded my arms slowly. "And you're asking the HVAC guy?" "I'm asking the man who showed up on time, fixed my ventilation system properly without cutting corners, spoke kindly to his son, and treated my employee like a human being when she was panicking." That's still a weird list to build a date invitation on. It's not a date. The way he said it felt too quick, like he corrected the idea before it finished existing. I looked at him carefully then. Really looked. There were shadows under his eyes. Tension in his shoulders. He looked exhausted in a way expensive suits couldn't hide. "What exactly do you need from me?" I asked. Quinlan exhaled slowly. "There are people in my industry who believe a man like me shouldn't be running a company this size. A rich one. A gay one." The room went quiet after that. "I usually ignore it," he continued. "But this weekend matters. I had someone supposed to attend with me. He backed out yesterday. And now you're asking me." "Yes." I rubbed the back of my neck. "Mr. Vale." Quinlan. "Quinlan," I corrected carefully. "I'm not really interested in pretending to be something I'm not." His eyes held mine for a long second. "Neither am I." That line hit harder than it should have. Still, I shook my head. "I've got a kid at home and a business to run. I don't belong in rooms like that. You'd be surprised." I picked up my bag before the conversation could get stranger. "Thanks for the offer, but no." For a second, disappointment flashed across his face before he hit it again. "All right," he said quietly. I left the building thinking that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next morning, my phone rang at 6:48 while I was making Noah waffles shaped like dinosaurs because apparently normal waffles were now unacceptable to modern children. Unknown number. I answer anyway. "Percy." I recognized Quinlan's voice immediately. "This is getting slightly concerning," I said. "How did you get my personal number?" "I have resourceful assistance." "Pretty sure that's illegal." "Probably." I could hear papers moving on his end of the line. Silence for a moment. Then his voice changed slightly. Less controlled. "I owe you a fuller explanation." "No, you really don't." "Yes," he said softly. "I do." I leaned against the kitchen counter while Noah attempted to drown his waffles in syrup behind me. "The person trying to sabotage this deal," Quinlan said, "has been spreading stories about me for weeks. Quietly. Strategically." "Ooh." There was a pause. Then he said the name. "Rowan Caldwell." Everything inside me stopped. Noah was still talking somewhere in the background. The toaster clicked. Cars moved outside the apartment window. All I could hear was that name. Rowan Caldwell. My former best friend. My first love. The man who destroyed the biggest contract of my life and disappeared before I ever learned the full truth. "Percy," Quinlan asked carefully, "are you still there?" I closed my eyes slowly, because suddenly this wasn't just a weird invitation anymore. Now it felt personal, and for the first time in years, I could feel an old wound opening back up. "If I go with you Sunday," I said quietly, "I want the truth." Quinlan's voice lowered. "About what?" I looked out the kitchen window while Noah argued passionately with a dinosaur waffle behind me. "About what Rowan wants from you," I said. I told myself agreeing to go to that gala was just business. That was the smart version of the story. Quinlan Vale needed someone stable standing beside him for one night, and I needed answers about Rowan Caldwell. Clean. Simple. Temporary. That explanation lasted exactly until Thursday afternoon when a garment bag showed up outside my apartment door. Noah opened it before I could stop him. "Oh my God, don't yell like that," I said automatically. "This suit costs more than our refrigerator. You don't know that. I can feel it spiritually." He held up the black tuxedo like it belonged in a museum. Underneath, it was a smaller box with dress shoes, cufflinks, and a handwritten note. With a black tie. "Ignore the cufflinks if they annoy you. Q." I stared at the note longer than necessary. "Q?" Noah asked suspiciously. "You're already using nicknames?" "We are not using nicknames. You kept the note, though." I shoved it into my pocket immediately. "Go finish your homework." That means yes. Kids should legally not be allowed to notice things that fast. The next 2 days became strangely normal in a way I didn't expect. Quinlan texted me constantly, but never in a pushy way. Just practical things at first. Gala schedule, names of investors, seating arrangements. But then little random messages started slipping in between them. "Don't let Noah convince you penguins can legally own property." I checked. "Your son sent me an article titled, 'Why Pancakes Are Emotionally Superior to Waffles.' You were right about the restaurant near 5th Street. Their coffee is terrible." I found myself smiling at my phone like an idiot more than once. Friday night, Quinlan called while I was fixing the kitchen sink. "You're breathing hard," he said immediately. "I'm under a sink fighting for my life." A pause. Then very quietly, Quinlan laughed. It caught me off guard because I realized I'd never heard him do it properly before. Not the controlled, almost smile version. A real laugh. Low and warm and tired all at once. "You should probably hire a plumber," he said. "I can't afford plumbers. I'm a small business owner." "You literally repair industrial ventilation systems." "Exactly. I have trust issues." Another soft laugh. Something about hearing that sound while sitting shirtless on my kitchen floor with a wrench in my hand did dangerous things to my brain. "So," I said carefully, "you always work this much?" "I sleep occasionally." That wasn't my question. Silence stretched for a second. Then Quinlan answered honestly. "Not really." I leaned back against the cabinet slowly. "You should." That's surprisingly bossy from a man currently losing a fight against household plumbing. I won the fight. Water immediately sprayed across my jeans. Quinlan laughed harder this time, and somehow that felt important. Saturday afternoon, I drove to Oraline Tower for the final fitting before the gala. I almost canceled twice on the way there. Not because I didn't want to go anymore, but because every time I thought about walking into some ballroom full of billionaire investors beside Quinlan Vale, my brain started listing all the reasons I didn't belong there. Quinlan's assistant Claire met me upstairs and brought me to a private conference suite that had basically been converted into a temporary dressing room. "He's finishing a call," she said. "He'll be here in a minute." I nodded and loosened my tie slightly. That was when I heard voices through the partially open side door. "Can't keep doing this to yourself, Quinn. I'm handling it. You haven't slept properly in 3 weeks." I said I'm handling it. Something in his voice stopped me cold. Not anger. Exhaustion. I glanced toward the doorway before I could stop myself. Quinlan stood near the window with his back partially turned, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. His assistant doctor, or maybe friend, I wasn't sure, handed him a small prescription bottle. Quinlan took one pill dry without water. My chest tightened unexpectedly. The other man lowered his voice. "You're having panic episodes again. I'm aware. You need to slow down. I don't have time to fall apart right now." The sentence hit me harder than it should have. I stepped back before they noticed me listening. A minute later, Quinlan entered the room like none of it had happened. Calm expression. Perfect posture. Tie straightened again. But now I knew the performance cost him something. His eyes lifted the second he saw me. And for a brief moment, he looked genuinely stunned. "You clean up well," he said quietly. I looked down at the tux. "I feel like I should be selling watches on a yacht." "You look good, Percy." The way he said it made my stomach do something deeply unhelpful. Claire escaped suspiciously fast after that, leaving us alone while Quinlan adjusted his cufflinks near the mirror. You don't have to do this, he said suddenly. I frowned. Do what? Tonight? If you change your mind. You want me to leave? His head snapped up immediately. No. Too fast. Too honest. The room went quiet for a second. Then Quinlan exhaled slowly and looked away. I just don't want you feeling trapped. I'm not trapped. He nodded once, but tension still sat heavy in his shoulders. I moved closer before really thinking about it. Quinlan. His eyes lifted to mine again. You don't have to act okay every second around me. Something changed in his expression then. Small but real. Like I'd accidentally touched a bruise he forgot existed. My ex used to say that too, he said quietly. I stayed silent. Quinlan looked down briefly while loosening his watch strap. When I was 27, someone leaked photos of us together to financial blogs. Investors started questioning whether I was stable enough to lead the company. He gave a humorless smile. Apparently being gay makes people think you'll collapse emotionally during quarterly reports. That's insane. It's profitable, he corrected softly. And your ex. He used the attention to get promoted at another firm. Jesus. I leaned against the table slowly. That's cruel. It was useful. No, I said firmly. It was cruel. Quinlan stared at me for a long moment after that. Like nobody had corrected him on that before. Finally, he looked away again. You're different from people in my world. That's supposed to be a compliment. Yes. I don't know why hearing that affected me so much. Maybe because Quinlan looked genuinely relieved every time I acted like a normal person around him. Maybe because loneliness recognizes loneliness faster than anything else. The gala started at 7. The Meridian Ballroom looked exactly like the kind of place designed to make ordinary people nervous. Crystal lights, black suits, expensive dresses, conversations that sounded polished before they even started. And Quinlan? Quinlan walked through that room like he owned the oxygen inside it. Except now I noticed the details I missed before. The slight stiffness in his jaw whenever someone shook his hand too long. The controlled breathing. The way his fingers occasionally tightened around his drink for no reason. Anxiety. Hidden beautifully, but still there. People stared when we entered together. Not openly rude. Just curious. Calculating. Quinlan leaned slightly closer while we crossed the ballroom. You can still run. I already suffered through the bow tie. It's too late now. That earned me another quick laugh. Honestly, I started relaxing after the first hour. Mostly because Quinlan never tried to turn me into someone else. He introduced me simply. This is Percy. Not contractor. Not fake partner. Just Percy. And weirdly enough, people liked me. One investor spent 20 minutes asking about small business ownership. Another man wanted advice about commercial ventilation systems. A woman from a hospital board laughed so hard at one of Noah's stories, she nearly spilled champagne on herself. Meanwhile, Quinlan stayed close enough that our shoulders brushed occasionally in crowded spaces. Every single time it happened, I noticed. Around 9:30, I finally caught him slipping away toward the rooftop terrace. I followed him automatically. Cold wind hit us the second the doors opened. Quinlan loosened his tie and exhaled hard like he'd been holding his breath for hours. You okay? Fine. You say that like it personally offends you. A tired smile flickered across his face before disappearing again. He moved toward the railing overlooking the city below. Sometimes these events feel like everyone's waiting for me to fail publicly. I walked over beside him quietly. You know what I think? I asked. What? I think you're exhausted from trying to carry everything alone. Quinlan looked at me slowly then. Really looked at me. No performance left. Just a man standing in cold air, trying very hard not to come apart. You barely know me, he said softly. Maybe, I answered. But it seems like nobody's been kind to you in a long time. His expression changed instantly after that. Not dramatic. Worse. Vulnerable. The wind moved through his dark hair while we stood there too close together. My eyes dropped briefly to his mouth before I could stop myself. And judging by the way Quinlan's breathing shifted, he noticed. For one dangerous second, I honestly thought he might kiss me. Then movement below caught my attention. I glanced down through the ballroom windows, and my entire body went cold. A man had just entered the gala floor wearing a dark suit and the exact same expression I remembered from years ago. Rowan Caldwell. And he was already looking straight up at us. The second I saw Rowan Caldwell standing downstairs, every good feeling I'd had that night disappeared. It was like someone reached into my chest and dragged me backward 6 years in a single heartbeat. He looked almost exactly the same. Still tall, still sharp, still carrying himself like the room naturally belonged to him. Rowan had always been beautiful in a dangerous kind of way. The kind of man who made people trust him before they realized they probably shouldn't. Beside me, Quinlan followed my line of sight. "That's him," he said quietly. "Yeah. You want to leave?" The fact he asked that instead of demanding I stay did something complicated to my chest. But before I could answer, Rowan looked up directly at us and smiled. Not warmly, like he'd already started calculating. "Well," I muttered, "that can't possibly mean anything good." Quinlan's jaw tightened slightly. "Stay close to me tonight." I glanced sideways at him. That sounded weirdly romantic. It wasn't supposed to. For the first time all evening, Quinlan actually looked nervous. We went back downstairs together. The energy in the ballroom had shifted now that Rowan was there. I noticed people greeting him immediately. Investors, executives, people who move through expensive spaces comfortably. Rowan belonged to this world in a way I never would. And somehow that still stung. "Percy." I turned before I even fully registered the voice. Rowan stood a few feet away holding a glass of whiskey. Like this was a casual reunion instead of emotional warfare. "Wow," he said softly. "It's really you." I forced myself to stay calm. "Been a while. 6 years. His eyes moved over my suit slowly. "You look good." "Careful," I said dryly. "People might think you're being sincere." One corner of his mouth lifted. God, I hated that part. Even now, part of me still remembered exactly how easy it used to be with him. Summer nights, cheap beer, sharing headphones in his first apartment while planning futures neither of us ended up getting. Then he ruined all of it. Rowan finally looked toward Quinlan. "Mr. Vale." Rowan. The tension between them felt sharp enough to cut skin. "I didn't realize Percy was your mystery guest tonight," Rowan said lightly. Quinlan's expression stayed unreadable. "Interesting sentence, considering you're the one who spent 3 weeks asking about him." They made Rowan pause briefly. So Quinlan had investigated him too. Good. Rowan recovered fast. "I was surprised, that's all." "No," Quinlan said calmly. "You were worried." Silence. Then Rowan laughed softly. "You really do like him." The sentence landed strangely between all three of us. Quinlan didn't answer. And somehow that silence answered enough. A waiter passed with champagne. Rowan grabbed one lazily before looking back at me. "Can we talk privately?" "No." "Percy." "No." Something darker moved behind Rowan's eyes then. Not anger exactly. Frustration. But before he could respond, an older man approached our group. Arthur Penfield, the investor Quinlan needed most tonight. "Quinlan," Penfield greeted warmly before turning toward me. "And Percy, right? We spoke earlier." "Good memory. My wife says I remember conversations better than anniversaries." I laughed despite myself. Penfield liked that. Unfortunately, Rowan noticed too. "Arthur," Rowan said smoothly, "did Quinlan mention Percy owns Northline Air?" Penfield nodded. "Small business owner. Impressive man. Definitely hard-working," Rowan agreed. "Though I remember hearing Northline had some compliance problems a few years back. Environmental disposal issues, wasn't it?" There it was. The attack. Clean. Casual. Public. My stomach tightened instantly. Penfield's expression shifted slightly. "Is that true?" Before I could answer, Rowan continued smoothly. "Probably nothing serious. I'm sure Percy handled it eventually." Handled it eventually. Jesus Christ. I suddenly understood exactly what Quinlan meant about strategic damage. Rowan never stabbed directly. He poisoned the air around people until everyone else stepped away on their own. And the worst part of me still reacted like the younger version of myself who used to trust him completely. Quinlan's voice cut through the tension immediately. "Northline's records are fully clean." Rowan glanced toward him mildly. I didn't say otherwise. You implied it. I raised a question. You created suspicion intentionally. The room around us suddenly felt quieter. Not silent, but attentive. Rowan smiled faintly. You're getting emotional, Quinlan. That hit exactly where he intended. I saw Quinlan's shoulders stiffen instantly, and suddenly I realized something awful. I was becoming a liability for him. Exactly what Rowan wanted. I stepped back slightly. Excuse me, I muttered. Percy, Quinlan said immediately. But I was already walking away. The ballroom felt suffocating now. Too many eyes. Too much noise. I moved fast toward the hallway outside the event space before someone grabbed my wrist. Warm fingers. Firm grip. I turned sharply. Quinlan, you can't disappear in the middle of this, he said quietly. I pulled my arm free, carefully. Actually, I think disappearing might help you a lot tonight. His expression tightened. Don't do that. Do what? Decide what I need without asking me. I laughed once, but there wasn't much humor in it. Come on, Quinlan. Look around. Men like Rowan belong in your world. Men like me fix air conditioning in your buildings. And eventually people like me embarrass people like you. The second the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Because Quinlan looked genuinely hurt. Not offended. Hurt. That's what you think this is? He asked quietly. I think Rowan was right about one thing. Which thing? That this started as business. Quinlan stared at me for a long second. Then he stepped closer. Too close. It did, he admitted softly. At first, the honesty in that answer hit harder than any lie could have. I looked away first. Percy, he said again, quieter this time. Stay. I shook my head slowly. You need someone polished beside you tonight. Someone who fits. Quinlan suddenly looked angry for the first time since I met him. Not loud anger. Worse, controlled anger. He stepped directly in front of me while guests passed nearby, pretending not to stare. I'm so tired, he said softly, of people deciding I should want someone artificial. My chest tightened painfully. Quinlan. No, his voice dropped lower. Listen to me for 1 second. I don't care if you know which fork to use at dinner. I don't care that your son thinks dinosaur waffles are emotionally important. I don't care that you showed up tonight slightly convinced you didn't belong here. His eyes locked onto mine. You're the most real person I've met in years. God, that almost ruined me right there. Footsteps approached behind us. Penfield. The older man looked between both of us calmly. Everything all right? I stepped back automatically. Yeah, sorry. I think I should probably head home. Penfield's attention shifted toward Quinlan. And what do you think? Quinlan didn't even hesitate. If Percy leaves, he said evenly, I leave too. Silence. Actual silence this time. Even Penfield looked surprised. You'd risk the partnership over this? The older man asked carefully. Quinlan's jaw tightened slightly. If a room full of investors sees kindness, loyalty, and honesty as weaknesses, then maybe this isn't a partnership worth having. Jesus Christ. I stared at him, because suddenly the cold, untouchable CEO standing in front of me looked nothing like the man people described online. He looked terrified and sincere. And somehow that was worse. Behind Penfield, Rowan had appeared near the hallway entrance again, watching all of it. His face changed the second he realized he'd lost control of the situation. Quinlan saw him too. Without breaking eye contact with me, he reached into his jacket pocket and handed Penfield a folded packet. What's this? Penfield asked. Proof, Quinlan answered calmly. Emails. Financial records. Evidence Rowan Caldwell manipulated procurement reports years ago, including the contract investigation connected to Percy's company. Rowan went completely still. For the first time all night, real panic crossed his face. Quinlan, he warned quietly. Too late. Penfield opened the packet slowly, and Rowan finally understood the game was over. Nobody spoke for a few seconds after Penfield opened the file. The hallway suddenly felt too small for all the tension packed inside it. Guests nearby had started pretending very badly not to listen. Rowan stood near the entrance with his jaw tight enough to crack stone, while Quinlan stayed beside me, so closely our shoulders were almost touching. Penfield flipped through the documents slowly. Email copies, procurement records, internal transfers. And right there in black and white was Rowan's name, connected to the complaint that destroyed my company's expansion contract 6 years earlier. I watched Penfield's expression harden page by page. Finally, he looked up. "Is any of this false?" he asked Rowan quietly. Rowan didn't answer immediately. That alone told everyone everything. "Arthur," he started carefully, "the situation is more complicated than—" "No," Penfield interrupted calmly. "Actually, I think it's very simple." That hit harder than shouting ever could have. Rowan's eyes moved to me then. For 1 second, the polished businessman disappeared, and I saw the man I used to love underneath all the ambition and manipulation. Tired, cornered, almost sad. "You really believe he's different from me?" Rowan asked quietly. Quinlan answered before I could. "Yes." The certainty in his voice stunned me. Rowan laughed once under his breath, but there wasn't much humor left in it anymore. "That's dangerous, Quinlan." "No," Quinlan said evenly. "What's dangerous is thinking loyalty is weakness." Another silence. Then Rowan looked at me again. And somehow that was the worst part. Because for the first time since seeing him tonight, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Just finished. "I loved you," Rowan said quietly. The words hit me right in the chest anyway. Not because I wanted him back, but because part of me had spent years wondering if any of it had been real. I swallowed slowly. "I know." His expression cracked slightly at that. "But you loved winning more," I continued softly. Rowan looked away first. A second later, Penfield closed the folder and handed it back to Quinlan. "I think we're done here." That was it. No dramatic explosion. No screaming. Just one powerful man quietly deciding another man no longer belonged in the room. And somehow that felt even heavier. Rowan stood there another moment like he wanted to say something else. Maybe an apology. Maybe an excuse. Maybe both. But in the end, he only looked at me one last time before walking away. This time, he didn't look back. The second he disappeared down the hallway, I finally exhaled properly and immediately realized my hands were shaking. Quinlan noticed too. Without saying anything, he stepped closer and lightly touched my wrist. That tiny gesture almost undid me more than the entire confrontation. Penfield adjusted his jacket slowly. "Percy." I looked up. "You deserved better than what happened to you," the older man said simply. There wasn't pity in his voice, just truth. I nodded once because suddenly talking felt difficult. Penfield glanced toward Quinlan next. "You should have handed me those records earlier. I wanted proof solid enough to survive lawyers." Penfield studied him for another second. "You care about him." Quinlan didn't answer. Again, that silence answered enough. Penfield sighed like a man too old to be surprised anymore. "Well, for what it's worth, I think your instincts are better than your timing." Then he walked away toward the ballroom, leaving me and Quinlan alone in the hallway. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then I laughed quietly out of nowhere. Quinlan blinked. "What?" I honestly thought tonight would involve less emotional damage. That startled an actual laugh out of him. God, I loved hearing that sound. The realization hit me instantly after the thought appeared. Loved, not past tense, present tense. And that terrified me a little. Quinlan must have seen something change in my face because his expression softened immediately. "Percy," I looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "You really would have walked away from the deal?" "Yes." "Why?" He stared at me like the answer should have been obvious by now. Because I was already losing things that mattered more. Jesus. The hallway suddenly felt too quiet. Too close. Rain tapped softly against the tall hotel windows nearby, while Quinlan stood in front of me, looking more open and vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. No armor left. No performance. Just him. "You scare me a little," I admitted quietly. A surprised smile touched his mouth. "That's probably fair." "No," I said softly. "Not like that." His expression shifted. And then, before I could overthink it, I reached for him. One hand against his jaw. Warm skin. Sharp inhale. And then I kissed him. It wasn't smooth. Honestly, It was kind of a mess. Too much emotion. Too many months of loneliness packed into one moment. Quinlan made this quiet surprise sound against my mouth before kissing me back hard enough to make my entire chest ache. And somehow that was the exact moment everything finally became real. Not the gala. Not the fake partnership. This. Us. When we finally pulled apart, Quinlan rested his forehead against mine and laughed softly under his breath like he couldn't believe this was happening either. Well, he murmured, slightly breathless, "That's definitely not business anymore." I laughed too. Then Quinlan looked at me carefully. "Come home with me." The dangerous part was how badly I wanted to say yes immediately. But instead I smiled slightly. I have a kid and a golden retriever that hates rich people. I can work with that. You say that now. I'm serious. I knew he was. That was the problem. 3 months later, Rowan Caldwell officially disappeared from most of the financial world that mattered. Penfield quietly withdrew support from 2 of Rowan's projects. Other investors followed. Lawsuits started appearing not long after once the procurement investigation reopened. Meanwhile, Quinlan's merger deal went through successfully. And me? I got something back too. Turns out, when you finally have proof someone sabotaged your company illegally, courts take that pretty seriously. The settlement money paid every debt Northline Air had left. I upgraded our equipment, hired more workers, and for the first time in years, stopped checking my bank account with low-level panic every morning. But honestly, the money wasn't the best part. The best part was watching Quinlan slowly become something softer. Not weaker, just happier. He started showing up at my apartment constantly. At first he acted like he needed excuses. "I brought food. You left your jacket here." Noah texted me 17 times about a science project. That last one was true. My son became obsessed with Quinlan almost immediately. Mostly because Quinlan actually listened when Noah talked. One Saturday afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and found the 2 of them sitting on the floor building some complicated cardboard aircraft disaster together. Quinlan still wore expensive black sweaters while doing it, which honestly felt psychotic. "You know, glue doesn't come out of cashmere, right?" I asked. Without looking up, Quinlan said, "Love requires sacrifice." Noah gasped dramatically. "Q, that was beautiful." I leaned against the doorway, smiling like an idiot. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped feeling temporary. One night about a year later, I woke up around 2 in the morning and found Quinlan asleep on my couch with paperwork still spread across his chest. The TV played quietly in the background. He looked exhausted, but peaceful, like maybe this apartment had become the only place he ever fully relaxed anymore. I sat beside him carefully, and suddenly I understood something. For years after Rowan, I thought love was supposed to feel unstable, intense, painful, like constantly trying not to lose someone. But this felt safe. Warm kitchen lights, burnt pancakes on Sunday mornings, Noah yelling from another room, Quinlan half asleep beside me wearing my old t-shirts instead of designer clothes. It felt ordinary, and maybe ordinary was the most beautiful thing I'd ever had. Quinlan stirred awake slowly. "Why are you staring at me like that?" I smiled. "Because when I'm with you," I said quietly, "I don't feel like I'm surviving anymore." His face changed instantly, soft enough to hurt. He reached for me without saying anything and pulled me down into another kiss. Slower this time. Certain. A year after the gala, Noah burned pancakes so badly our smoke detector went off at 7 in the morning. I walked into the kitchen coughing while Quinlan stood near the stove looking deeply betrayed by breakfast food. "This child is trying to kill me," he announced. "No," Noah argued. "This is artistic cooking." I laughed so hard I had to grab the counter. Quinlan looked over at me then, really looked at me, and smiled. "Funny," he said softly. "1 year ago, I told you I needed a man by Sunday. I walked over slowly until we were standing close enough to touch. And now?" I asked. Quinlan leaned his forehead gently against mine, while the smoke alarm screamed in the background, and Noah continued defending his criminal pancakes. And quietly, like it was the easiest truth in the world, Quinlan said, "Now I just need you." And that's the end of Percy and Quinlan's story. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. If this story made you smile, relax, or feel something tonight, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your favorite moment in the comments. I'll see you in the next story.